Phillipsburg Dolphins, and I am the moderator for this event. I will briefly introduce each of the panel members, starting with one that will join us later, Dr. George French Jr. And Dr. French is on the board of SACS, and he is going to try to lead and join us in between his meetings. In 2019, Dr. George T. French Jr. became the 5th president of Clark Atlanta University, the largest United Negro College Fund member institution in the country and the largest private HBCU within the state of Georgia. Prior to his appointment, Dr. French served for 14 years as the president of Miles College, making him one of the longest serving university presidents in the nation. His degrees include a JD from the University of Louisville, Miles Law School, a JD, and a PhD from Jackson State University. Another panel member, in 2015, Dr. Mary Schmidt Campbell. And Dr. Campbell, as you can see, she's joining us via Zoom, began her tenure as the 10th president of Spelman College, a leading liberal arts college for women of African descent. Prior to her appointment, she served as the dean of New York University's Tisch School of the Arts for over 2 decades. Dr. Campbell received her BA in English literature from Swarthmore College. She earned her master's in art history as well as her PhD in humanities from Syracuse University and has received numerous honorary degrees. Dr. David A. Thomas. Dr. Thomas, raise your hand. Okay. Dr. David A. Thomas is the 12th president of Morehouse College, a leading liberal arts college created for African American men. Dr. Thomas has also served as dean of Georgetown University's McDonald School of Business. Dr. Thomas earned a PhD in Organizational Behavior Studies and a Master of Philosophy in Organizational Behavior, both from Yale University. He also earned a Master of Organizational Psychology from Columbia University and a Bachelor of Administrative Sciences from Yale College. Another panel member, Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice. Dr. Rice is the 6th president and CEO of Morehouse School of Medicine and the first woman to lead the freestanding medical institution. She most recently served as dean and executive vice president of Morehouse School of Medicine, where she has served since 2011. Prior to joining Morehouse, Montgomery Rice held faculty positions and leadership roles at various health centers, including academic health centers. Most notably, she was the founding director of the Center for Women's Health Research at Meharry Medical College. Dr. Montgomery Rice holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry from the Georgia Institute of Technology, a medical degree from Harvard Medical School, and a Doctor of Humane Letters honorary degree from Rush University. The next person I'd like to recognize is Dr. Reverend Wesley Williams. In 2020, he was appointed the president of the Interdenominational Theological Center, known as ITC, after a one-year appointment as interim president. ITC is a historically Black graduate theological school. Before his appointment to the ITC, Williams was the vice president of strategic initiatives for the Forum for Theological Exploration, where he served for 15 years. Prior to ITC, or FTE, Williams served as the National Black Leadership Initiative on Cancer at Morehouse School of Medicine. He also served as a pastor at First African Presbyterian Church in Lithonia, Georgia. He holds a Master of Divinity degree from ITC and 2 bachelor's degrees in psychology and philosophy and religion from Florida A&M University. He is an ordained ruling elder in the Presbyterian Church. Dr. Kevin E. James. Raise your hand, Dr. James. In 2020, he was appointed the 19th president of Morris Brown College after serving as interim since 2019. Morris Brown College is a historically Black college founded in 1881 in Atlanta, Georgia by the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and is the only college in Georgia founded solely for African American patrons. Prior to his appointment as president, Dr. James served as interim CEO of the 100 Black Men of America Incorporated. Dr. James earned his bachelor's degree in communication disorders and social sciences from Winthrop University, a master's degree in business management, leadership, and organizational effectiveness from Troy State University, and a Doctor of Education degree in higher education leadership from Nova Southeastern University. And so at this time, I want to turn it over to Dr. Sullivan. And Dr. Sullivan is our speaker today. And Dr. Sullivan is the founder of the Morehouse School of Medicine. Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Dawkins. And I certainly add my welcome and my congratulations to all of the scholars who've been part of the program. And I wish you well as you continue in your academic and professional development. I'd also like to thank the presidents of the AU Center schools who have agreed to give of their time to share with us their experiences, their challenges, their triumphs, as well as their frustrations in their leadership positions that they have. Because as all of you know, this program was developed because of the need to have a stronger group of individuals prepared to lead our colleges, to give them the talent, direction, the inspiration that is needed. Classically, one becomes an administrator in higher education primarily because of one's academic credentials, one's achievements as a professor, whether it's in engineering, biology, medicine, literature, etc. But when one becomes an administrator, and certainly when one becomes a senior administrator or president of an institution, what's required is a wide array of talents, because you as a leader become the representative to the public of the institution, which means you have to be prepared to resolve conflicts, whether those conflicts are between your students, between the students and the faculty, between your institution and the community, or crisis where the press comes on campus with their microphones and their cameras wanting instant answers. And you, as the leader of the institution, must be prepared, because the public's perception of your institution will depend heavily on how you respond to that. So this program is designed to help you begin that process. It is not the end of the process. You who will go on to become presidents, chancellors, or other senior administrators will continually face these throughout your career. So this is the beginning of that. This is not, this program is not designed to give you all of the skills that you need. So one of the reasons for this panel today is for you to hear from individuals who are in those positions of leadership, who have addressed and have to continue to address all of these challenges, representing the students, the faculty, the administration, the parents, the community, the funders, all of those individuals, because our institutions really have broad ownership They're owned by the alumni, by the students, by the faculty, by the donors, whether they're public or private. So your success as a leader of the institution will depend upon how you're able to address those challenges so that the institution is able to accomplish its mission. And those who are supporters of the institution will see that their support is yielding results that are intended. So that is what our panelists will share with us. You'll get some examples. This, again, is not the end of the experience, but the beginning. So we're very pleased that they have agreed to share this time with us. So we have several questions, and we'll try and go through them as quickly as possible, but give each president an opportunity to give as comprehensive answer as possible during the time that we have. So let me begin with the first question, and we'll look to the following presidents to respond to this question after I present it to you. We'll have Dr. Williams from ITC and Dr. Rice from Morehouse School of Medicine respond to this comment and question. It's as follows. At HBCUs around the nation, the COVID-19 pandemic has pushed administrators to think more strategically about their institutions in the wake of perhaps the most daunting challenge to face higher education in the 21st century. In many ways, Dr. Beverly Guy Shephall and Kimberly Jackson from Spelman wrote, it is in many ways it is the best of times and the worst of times. The challenge that we've been living with over the past almost 2 years now. So I'd like to ask Dr. Williams and then Dr. Rice, if you would comment about some of the challenges that you faced, and if you agree with that statement about the best of the times on the one hand and the worst of times, but what your experience has been as a leader of your institution and how you have met those challenges. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Is that better?
Yes.
Good deal. Good morning to all of you, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you this morning, as well as with my colleagues from the Atlanta University Center Schools. Dr. Sullivan, to your question about whether I agree with that statement, I couldn't agree more. These past 2 years have been indeed, I would say, the best of times and the worst of times. But to put ITC's pivot during this period in context, it'd be important to understand what ITC is and what we do. ITC is a freestanding graduate theological school. So we serve and prepare the next generation of leaders for the broader community through faith communities, representing the broadest swath of the Black church and by extension the Black community in any theological institution on these shores. We're in a field that prior to COVID-19 was undergoing a period of destabilization. This subfield we call theological education. And that broad kind of destabilization within this field had micro manifestations at pretty much every institution in the US and Canada in this field. And the same was true of ITC. And so prior to COVID-19, we were already in a pivot. And that pivot began with a task force process that I was appointed to lead starting in the fall of 2018 that we called the ITC 2.0 task force, following almost a decade of a spin cycle of crisis. We came to that task force recognizing that the design of the institution, the model itself, was really built for a former time. And much of the destabilization that we saw in the broader field and in the institution itself was a result of trying to operate payphone systems in the smartphone world, right? And so what we came to that task force saying was that our task was not to save the ITC as we know it, but to begin a process of co-creating the ITC that our congregations and communities need. So after that 7-month engagement, we came to 3 conclusions. One, that the mission and vision of ITC has never been more urgent. ITC's mission around cultivating leaders who practice justice and peace through liberating and transforming spirituality is right on time for the moment that we're in. The second, again, has to do with ITC's unique positioning in the broader field, given the fact that we represent such a broad swath of the church and broader community, and are uniquely positioned to strengthen the Black church's work in social impact and social justice. And then finally, this was the punchline that we as a team delivered to the board, was that if, and this was in spring of 2019, that if ITC's mission and vision are going to have a future, and if we're going to take full advantage of the positioning, that unique positioning of ITC, it will require a top to bottom overhaul of the institution. And we did mean top to bottom, no stone left unturned. So one of our board members at the time said to me, well, Reverend, it sounds like you're saying to the board, we need to vote ourselves out of a job. And I responded simply, yes. I did. Because that top to bottom overhaul began with governance. And there has been no more consequential a decision in the last 2 years of my engagement at ITC than the recomposition of the board. And that's where the top to bottom overhaul began. And the rest, as they say, is history. So COVID-19 came along the second semester of my first year appointed to the role of interim president, and represented a pivot within a pivot. We started in this process of institutional innovation we call ITC 2.0, which involved governance, executive leadership, but also not just those. Those would be cosmetic changes if we weren't asking some of the deeper institutional questions about the nature and purpose of our work in service to the changing landscape that we're engaging, and the students who are not the students that we had 20 years ago, right? And so asking those deeper questions about the nature and purpose of our work in service to our mission moved us into a pivot around our educational delivery and design, again, governance, operation, curriculum, all of which has been underway for the past 2 years. And so when COVID-19 came around, it just pushed us off the cliff to say nothing is a surety, everything is up for grabs, and it actually accelerated the process that we had already started.
Rev, I'm going to remind everyone that you have 2 to 3 minutes to make your response. But he is a preacher. And we gave him a little bit of slack, but Dr. Sullivan, we're going to just give him 2 or 3 minutes. We want you to know this is going live on YouTube. If you have a YouTube connected to your Facebook or social media, it is live now on YouTube. So all of you, be mindful, as well as Madam President, who is virtual. Dr. Sullivan?
Sure. Thank you very much, President Osher. You took the words out of my mouth. Great to hear from you, President Williams, but I'd like to ask the panelists so that we will be able to get to a fair number of questions. Try and be comprehensive but concise, contradictory, but indeed, we know that you as presidents can meet the challenge. And we'll see that with Dr. Montgomery Rice.
Thank you very much, and to the scholars, congratulations on this milestone in your leadership journey. And thank you for allowing us to come and share this time with you. You know, we were prepared. Our vision is leading the creation and advancement of health equity. And since the time of Dr. Sullivan, we have been identifying health disparities. And so we were not surprised when the pandemic came and we saw the disproportionate impact on people of color because they are the essential workers, because they suffer more chronic diseases, because they don't have as much choice. So we were prepared. And we were able to pivot immediately to our online education, our business continuity plan, etc. And so we were okay at the medical school, but we were concerned about our AUCC colleagues. And so we hope that we have become, and we know that we have, that anchor institution for them for delivering science. Because we made decisions based on science. And we work collectively as a group of presidents who started meeting every week on Zoom. preparing so that we could beat this pandemic, so that we could get our students back into a learning environment that continue to contribute to their levels of excellence. And we have done that. If you think about what we did, we built our online symptom trackers within a week or so. We partnered with Microsoft and others who were coming to us to help us build out our testing strategy. We created policies around everything that we did, and we shared those such that we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel for the next time. We prepared ourselves for the next pandemic and everything that we were doing. We had lots of people throwing resources at us, and we became greater stewards of our resources by ensuring that there was equitable distribution to all of our campuses. And we looked at our campuses collectively, but also individually, listening for everybody's voice around the table about what made Spelman unique, and what made Morehouse College, and what made Clark Atlanta University, and what made the medical school unique. And so what I'm most proud of is that how collected we have been in our ability to lead through this pandemic. And so, yes, we were prepared. And so my message to you would be anticipation. You must be able to anticipate what you cannot yet see. And when it occurs, you will be able to lead through it. You don't do it on an island though. You do it with other voices around you, and you must listen to those voices and adhere to the recommendations and opportunities that are presented to you to be able to incorporate that into the solution.
Thank you, Dr. Montgomery Rice. Second question, we will look to President James and President Campbell to comment on it. Dr. French is on his way, and he is here. While this question is being discussed, we'll give him an opportunity, but we'll try and rotate questions so that each president will have an opportunity to comment. So here is the comment. The Aspen Institute hosted a series, The Future of HBCUs in the COVID Era. Several HBCU presidents participated, and they explored the historic lack of investment in HBCUs, the unique challenges they face in the pandemic, and how we can create a more equitable future for our young people. Now, this conference looked at the business model currently being used and what changes must happen as these institutions prepare for the future. So the question for the presidents, asking President James and then Dr. Campbell, if you would address the changes that you've made at your institution to help you prepare for the future, and would ask if you might give an example of things that are underway now as a result of preparing for these changes. President James.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, and I just want to say greetings to everyone. Congratulations on being here. It's a phenomenal program. I want to start by talking a little bit about, and I'm going to try to stick to 2 minutes, okay? Talking a little bit about Morris Brown College, first and only HBCU in the state founded by African Americans. You all know the history of Morris Brown. We lost our accreditation almost 20 years ago. People told me I was absolutely nuts for trying to resurrect this institution. In a little less than 3 years, we've absolutely turned the school around. And you all will see next week a huge announcement forthcoming from Morris Brown College when it comes to federal financial aid programs. We received our accreditation canvass this year. I'll never forget my first day on the job at Morris Brown. I was walking around the institution and I was talking out loud to God. And I said, God, help me. How are we going to resurrect Morris Brown College? $35 million bankruptcy. We lost all of our land. My first day on the job, the employees were 6 paychecks behind. We had $900 to our name. How in the world am I going to bring Morris Brown College from death? I was walking around my campus and I was talking out loud, and God spoke to me and said, use what you got. And the first thing that I did was I looked up, and I'm looking directly at a brand new $1.9 billion Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And then the next thing that came to my mind was, what was your top academic program back in the day? Top academic program was hospitality management. I said, I know what I'm gonna do to save Morris Brown. We're gonna build our own hotel on this campus right here in downtown Atlanta. I pitched the idea to the chairman of the board. He said, it's a great idea. You gotta get this to a 24-member board. And our board retreat, I pitched the idea, presented on it. At the end of that conversation, it was a very detailed conversation, 5 hours of debate. Go build your hotel. So to go back to the answer to your question, I think that HBCUs really need to invest in business and do something that sustain the institution for many, many years to come. Morris Brown College, we just signed I'm gonna tell you how long, but a very substantial, lengthy contract with Hilton Hotels, where we're gonna be building a $30 million hotel on our campus. I can get out of the business of begging. Get out of the business of begging individuals for funding, because we're gonna have substantial revenue coming in for many, many, many years to come. And so HBCUs are already tapping into it. I was looking at an example with Southern University, where they're looking at importing and doing some different things, right? Where it's gonna be sustainable revenue. I know that Fort Valley, I believe, was looking into some of that kind of business. So we need to think outside of the box of what can we do, especially in major cities like Atlanta, where we can bring sustainable revenue and ideas and innovation to our HBCU campuses, especially in a city like Atlanta.
Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Campbell, we welcome your comments.
Thank you. And first, let me congratulate all of the leaders who are gathered this morning. This is, as Dr. Montgomery Rice said, a really important milestone. But I also want to thank CAU for taking on the responsibility of organizing this institute. It's a great idea and a real addition to our campuses. I'm going to start with some observations about not only Spelman, but all HBCUs, particularly when I came in as president in 2015. The first observation that I want to make is that there is an extraordinary gap between the resources, economic resources of the Black community, and a business model that depends on tuition income from that very same community. The income of Black Americans is the lowest on the scale, below Latinos, Asians, white Americans, and our net income is actually expected to decline. And yet, almost all of our colleges have an economic model that is based on increasing our tuition every year. So there's a disconnect between that. That's observation number one. Number two, despite the lack of resources that we have, our outcomes are absolutely outsized. In Spelman's case, we produce more Black women who earn PhDs in STEM fields than any other college or university in the country. That's crazy, given the resources that we have. The third observation I want to make is that if you look back historically at our intervention in any field, we always change the game, whether it's the music industry, whether it's tennis, whether it's writing, whether it's filmmaking. So we know that the creative, our heritage brings to bear an extraordinary creative capacity for change. So we had already begun at Spelman, we had already begun to try to address some of those problems long before COVID came. When COVID came, it gave all of us a sense of urgency. And because of ironically, because of the racial reckoning in this country, it gave what we were doing a visibility we probably never would have had. And it expanded our credibility to a larger audience. So I just want to choose one instance where we are building on that. We had for years been building, planning an online platform to expand a suite of courses, learning opportunities to an adult population. We call it eSpelman. We are launching East Spelman in January, and we were able to get that up and running because all of a sudden now we had faculty who had become expert in the past 18 months in teaching online and developing curriculum and developing courses. We understood more about advising and the support structures that go with online. So we are now ready to ramp up. We have corporate partners. Walmart has signed on, Target has signed on. We're appealing to a general audience. We're partnering with Morehouse on a Center for Black Entrepreneurship that will be online. So what COVID did is it helped us put the pedal on the floor and really accelerate these changes. But I have to say, I repeat what Dr. Williams's phrase, co-create the business model for this college in order for us to continue to thrive into the 21st century.
Thank you very much, Dr. Campbell. We appreciate those comments. Let me go now to our third question and give the following presidents an opportunity to comment. President Thomas from Morehouse College, Dr. Montgomery Rice from Morehouse School of Medicine, and President James from Murray Stroud. The comment is as follows. While you enter this role with many years of executive leadership experience, please share one memory of some, quote, knowledge or, quote, skill, quote, that you wish you had learned or had mastered before coming into the role of an HBCU president. So President Thomas, then Dr. Rice, and then President James.
Good morning, and I'll also offer my congratulations to all of the fellows and scholars. Can you hear me? Right? Yeah. Okay. This is not an easy question to answer because much of what I've learned in my 4 years, exactly 4 years, January 1, as president of Morehouse, has actually deepened things I already understood. My background is as a professor of management and leadership, but primarily at the business school, in addition to being at Georgetown as a professor for 22 years at Harvard Business School. And the thing that I wish I didn't know more about, having taught at a business school for 22 years, I'm a little embarrassed to say, but it's finances. And a particular aspect of finance that's different than corporate finance is the finances that drive an undergraduate institution. And it's a very different kind of accounting, understanding things like net tuition revenue, and how you explain that to your constituencies. In particular, quite frankly, when I got to Morehouse, it turned out that we had a structural deficit, which meant that for the prior 4 or 5 years, we had actually been generating 11 months of operating cash to operate an institution for 12 months. But we had done some pretty effective financial engineering with our lines of credit. And so it masked over quite frankly, some of the reality of our finances. And I started to realize that, I didn't understand deeply enough what drives an undergraduate liberal arts college, in particular, if you don't have a graduate school. And I came out of the graduate school world, where the concepts around things like net tuition revenue are much less relevant because people are usually paying close to the sticker price, unless you've got a large endowment. And so that's the area where, I would say overnight, I had to deepen knowledge and had underestimated how much I didn't know about the particulars of what drives the financial health of an undergraduate school. So that would be my answer.
I have had the pleasure of serving at every level of academia. From instructor level, I became tenured as an associate professor at University of Kansas, and then was a professor and served as chair. I've served on probably every one of the important committees, admissions committee, institutional affairs committees in academia. And so when I came to Morehouse School of Medicine, I had been a dean previously and senior vice president. And so I came as the dean and executive vice president. And I would tell you what I learned and what I wish I had appreciated more when I came to Manhattan the first time, or for my first experience at the HBCU, is how to finesse the low expectations that people have of HBCUs. And it continues to still amaze me of the low expectations that people have of our students until they meet them, until our learning environments, until they come into them, until our faculty, until they engage with them. And when we get back to thinking about COVID-19, Mary said it best. It was a platform for us to demonstrate the excellence that we have. And it is just, a lot of people have become woke, I guess, to who we are and what we are, and how much we contribute and the impact that we have. And so for me, it is the learning that I continue to engage in every day with external persons, and trying to not even convince them, but to demonstrate and show the excellence that is housed in our organizations and the finesse that it takes to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Start, President James.
I love that word finesse. One thing that I had to learn very quickly, my experience is a lot different from my colleagues here because of what I inherited at Horace Brown. I mentioned earlier, $35 million bankruptcy, the loss of 36 or 40 acres of land. No funding, we had no money. We were in debt to the A&E Church, $4.2 million, $35 million bankruptcy, like I mentioned, so on and so forth. The hardest thing that I had to overcome was getting people to believe it was possible. Because from my understanding, no HBCU has ever come back 20 years after closing, even though we never closed, right? And so what I had to learn very quickly that I was never taught was how to finesse the political sphere. How do you get the governor to buy into this closed, bankrupt, historical Black college? How do you get the mayor to buy in? How do you get the city council to buy in? How do you get your own alumni to buy in, right? And so I really, all of my life I've said, I hate politics. I don't like, even though I'm a people person, even though I love people, but the whole working with individuals in a political sphere, getting their buy-in has been very difficult. However, John Maxwell says this, and I say it all the time. Momentum is a leader's best friend. Momentum is a leader's best friend. If you can get that momentum started, if you get that train started, it's very difficult to stop that moving train. And so one thing again, to answer the question, being able to finesse that political sphere, working with on every level, from the governor to the president, right? Right now, you hear a lot of politics, a lot of political conversation in this country around HBCUs. 65 presidents just yesterday, we signed a document saying, look, we need more funding, right? That whole politics of finessing the HBCU presidency is very hard work. And so it's something that you're gonna have to learn. And you all get a heads up on learning that.
Thank you very much, President James. But I think you've heard, to be a leader of HBCU, you have to be innovative, creative, a salesperson, a coach, because nothing is accomplished by the president alone. You need to have your team of faculty, alumni, administrators, your donors, et cetera. And it's a process of constant learning. No one of these presidents would say that they are complete in their own development. You're constantly learning. The day you stop learning is the last day you'll be president. So thank you very much for your input. Our next question, let me make a comment. The Aspen Institute hosted a series called The Future of HBCUs in the COVID Era, where several presidents participated and explored the historic lack of investment. Let's see. Am I repeating?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Let me go on to the next question. The 25 fellows in this inaugural class are preparing to lead HBCUs. All right. You see, I'm still learning. Here's our next question. The best of times. For more than 150 years, HBCUs have paved the way and have survived and operated with less. However, these institutions need more gifts from the private sector and the public sector to maintain our campuses and to support our students, our faculty, and our administration. What does the future look like regarding financial resources as we move forward in the 21st century? We'll ask the presidents to comment on how you're paving the way for the future by recruiting talented faculty and administrators, as well as students who will be products of your institutions. We will have Dr. Thomas from Morehouse, Dr. Williams from ITC, Dr. Campbell from Spelman, and if Dr. French joins us, we'll give him an opportunity to comment as well. But we'll begin first with President Thomas.
Great. So what are we doing to recruit the best faculty and administrators? A few things. First of all, at Morehouse, we finished our strategic plan, and one of the things that we committed to was to make sure that we move all of our salaries between the median and the 75th percentile.
Wow.
It's very clear that many of our roles are underpaid. And the reality is, as we looked at it, by the time we get to 2030, almost no faculty who taught at Morehouse College in the 80s and early 90s will be there. And those faculty were extraordinary. And they were recruited at a very different time in terms of what the opportunity set was that was available for extraordinarily well-trained African-American, in particular, PhDs. So it starts with us simply trying to make ourselves more competitive. We've taken advantage of this COVID moment to radically turn around our finances. We're about to launch a capital campaign. $100 million of that will be devoted to faculty and research. So there's a resource level that we're focused on. But after that, The great thing from Morehouse that I've learned, in particular, recruiting senior faculty, senior leaders, is just being able to talk about our value proposition as relevant to the 21st century. As relevant to the 21st century. And I think we've had great luck recruiting extraordinary people. We recruited a CFO, Chief Operating Officer, who left Cornell to come here as the #2 person there. Came here, did an extraordinary job, and because he was extraordinary, he got recruited to a greater opportunity. So he's gone now. But with that, when he came in, I also very deliberately pointed him toward mentoring his successor. So the other thing that I've become focused on when I recruit great faculty is to get them to not think that this is their last stop. And when I recruit great administrators. What I think attracts people is the value proposition that I love. President James's notion that, right, momentum matters, and getting people, recruiting people who feel the momentum of the college. The last thing I'll say that I've discovered is that in our midst, there were a critical mass, or there is a critical mass of younger faculty, associate and assistant professors who had not been given the runway to unleash their real innovation and entrepreneurship. And one great example of that is we have a set of faculty, I think only there's about 7 or 8 of them that now form a group. I think only one is currently tenured. And they've taken Morehouse, motivated by what was going on in the pandemic. And we are considered one of the leading schools in the country using virtual reality to actually teach. Not simply to play games, but to actually teach courses like chemistry and biology, as well as in the social sciences and doing interdisciplinary work. And it was very interesting. I went to one of the faculty members who's engaged in this, and I pulled him aside and said, I was once like you, at a school that had a great history. And so I'm sure that you'll have moments of feeling like your senior colleagues don't really appreciate what you're doing. And she almost started crying. And I said to her, well, you just have to understand, go full force because the president has your back. And literally, she took that to heart, told it to her colleagues, and these guys are sailing. And they're going to do some extraordinary things. That I also think they have the sense that, if I was down the street at Emory, I probably couldn't do this. There's a lot of runway here. So that's the other thing that I've become very conscious of in terms of developing the next generation of faculty who we want to stay at Morehouse. And the great thing too is that once faculty members come and they're there for at least 3 or 4 years, they stay because they really buy the uniqueness of our mission. As I like to say, we're the only place on the planet in higher education that produces Black male excellence at scale and as an expectation, not an exception. So that's the way I go at that.
Thank you very much, President Thomas. President Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. My response to that question, first when I encountered that question, I thought about it that there were two trains running in that question. One around philanthropy, financial health and sustainability, the other being around faculty retention and recruitment. But there's a way in which those two intersect that echoes much of what I heard from President James and President Thomas. And it goes to a word of wisdom I received some time ago from a colleague who said, Matt, the scarcity is a myth. He said, there is no shortage of resources. He said, there's only a shortage of compelling narratives that draw resources from where they are to where you need them to be, right? And so one of the daunting tasks, echoing President James, that we had at ITC, was really beginning to change the public narrative of the institution. And the first move in changing the public narrative was not so much public speaking, but it was public listening, right? Listening very deeply to what the field was calling for, listening very deeply to what the philanthropic sector was interested in, and listening to the problems that our constituents, congregations, and broader communities were trying to solve. And that process of listening enabled us to begin to generate, begin to think about, again, this differentiating kind of value proposition that ITC offers within this field. And that became the seed of a public narrative that over the past 2 years has enabled us to enlist philanthropic support, a broader donor base, increasing fundraising at an average of 21% year over year over the last 2 years, interrupting a consecutive series of years of operating deficits, establishing a year-over-year trend and operating surpluses. But more also in tandem with that public narrative beginning to attract on a very small faculty. We've been able to hire 4 new faculty over the past 2 years that are beginning to build out a new generation of professors at ITC, where we've had veteran professors who have been there over 40 years, right, serving faithfully at ITC. And in both cases, it's been related to this mission alignment and a public narrative that's born both of imagination that comes from intensive listening, but also integrity, recognizing that there is a infrastructure management in place that will take good care of and steward resources in a way such that we're not doing salesmanship and storytelling, we're actually doing the work of making a public impact around programs.
Thank you very much, President Williams. And now we hear from President Campbell. So,
Thank you. One of the ideas that has emerged at Spelman, which I think has been very exciting, is, and it's emerged among our senior team leadership, is that we have a lot of talent right here, right now on the campus, and that all of us as senior leaders have to be on the lookout for that talent, even if it's not in our own division, so that we create a climate at Spelman where people who come here come and believe that this is a place where I can come and grow and develop and really nurture and realize myself. So before we even get to recruitment, we spend a lot of time thinking about cultivating the talent we already have. So we do periodic market rate salary surveys. I was listening to Dr. Thomas on that issue of making sure that there is salary equity. That's absolutely important for faculty and staff. We do ours every 3 years. We actually looked for money specifically to target for faculty development, and we have a joint grant among Spelman, Morehouse, and Prairie View that we got from a group of foundations over several years to develop our faculty talent. We also started a couple of years ago a leadership development institute internally for our staff. And it's a very rigorous 9-month process. We bring in outside speakers. We address a variety of skill sets. We give our budding staff leaders mentors within the college, and that's been incredibly successful. And we make opportunities for our staff and faculty participate in institutes like this for their continued growth. In terms of recruitment, when I came into higher education, it always struck me that recruitment felt very passive to me. I know we go out, we do our recruitment fairs, and we show up on different campuses, but if you think of the way athletes get recruited, it's much more robust. It's much more assertive. They're out there in the field looking at people when they're young in development. And we are beginning to adopt a much more aggressive mindset to go out. Where are the centers of excellence? Let's introduce those young people in middle school and high school. Where are there to HBCUs and to Spelman in particular? Where are the organizations like Jack and Jill that we can speak to? How can our alumni participate in helping us with recruitment? Because our alumni are probably the best salespeople for our college at all of our HBCUs. And finally, we pay a lot of attention to succession. We actually do have succession exercises about every 6 months, where we invite people to look at their divisions and departments and say, okay, if for any reason I'm not here, how am I developing the next person who can stand in for me, at least temporarily, if not permanently? So I think our campuses have this incredible opportunity to be the place that really looks after and takes care of the talent that come here, as well as inviting others, to join us.
Thank you very much, President Campbell, for those remarks. A final question for our panel of presidents, I will read and also give them an opportunity to make any closing comments they would wish to leave with you. In the question, it's really more of a request, and that is, would you please share the most rewarding experiences that you have had during this pandemic, and an experience that encourages you and gives you hope? And we will call on President Williams, followed by President Thomas at Morehouse, President James at Morris Brown, and finally President Campbell at Spelman. So we welcome your comments and any. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. And Dr. Montgomery Price, of course. Morehouse School of Medicine. So can we start with President Williams?
With all of this talk about change, structurally, programmatically, it can be easy to lose sight of the impact on individual lives. And as we were moving into the summer, we were able to gather with a small group of students, some of whom were our distance students who came from as far as Oklahoma to be a part of a gathering celebrating students who were graduating in one of our constituent denominational groups. And one of the students pulled me aside, a student from Oklahoma, pulled me aside and said, President Williams, I need to say something to you. She said, I've been a distance student in ITC now for a couple of years. And I chose ITC above other schools because of this mission alignment. I feel called to this intersection of faith and justice, and called to be a leader in that regard. She said, but I didn't feel like I was a part of this community until this past year. And that past year had been a period in which we got very clear about what it meant to operate in an online environment, and how to take the magic or the secret sauce of the ITC that really is the community, which contributes to the kind of leadership and personal and spiritual formation that really is a signature for the leaders who come out of ITC. She said, I didn't feel a part of that community until now. And what that's done since then is she's become a local leader in Oklahoma in ways that she wasn't before. There was a recent case of a young man who at the last minute received a stay of execution. She was a primary mover in that campaign, but she said she felt buttressed and supported by her school in order to be able to make an impact of the local level. That for me was a rewarding kind of outcome of some of these structural changes that let us know that we were on the right track.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go on to President Thomas, followed by President Montgomery Rice.
This is actually a really hard question because it says, choose one of your most rewarding moments, because there have been many. Mine really gets captured by the experience that I've had of our students. Our students were very much engaged in the protest that happened as a result of George Floyd. And they were involved in the leadership of several that happened here in Atlanta. And I went to the launch of one of those protests. And it was just so obvious to me that they really understood Morehouse's place in the world as a beacon around nonviolent social advocacy. It was heartening to see. And the other experience of our students that really spoke to me was when we first decided to come back to campus. There were people, including some in our community, who said, well, Morehouse may not do too well in this pandemic environment because, these are guys, they're Black guys, they're not health conscious, get them to keep their mask on, get them to take care of each other. It's going to be a real challenge. And, it's compared, and we get compared a lot to Spelman. Women. And I've really seen our young men take ownership of our campus to keep it safe. They haven't been perfect wearing masks, but if you walk my campus, 80–90% of those guys are wearing their masks. And if I walk up to them and just tug mine, theirs are up, and they check each other. They've also really been our student leaders have really been the vanguard to make that happen and really own the campus. So for me, the most rewarding aspect of this has been how it's highlighted for me who our students are, and they get Morehouse. They get that this is not just another place to come and get certified.
Thank you, President Thomas. President Montgomery Rice.
So I think the most rewarding thing has been the recognition that this pandemic brought forth was the need for more Black physicians and healthcare providers. We have been on a growth spurt at Morehouse School of Medicine. When I became the dean 10 years ago, we were a class size of 56, and in 2017, we reached a class size of 100 for the MD program, and all of our other programs increased 20%, and we started 6 new degree programs. The biggest challenge when you're running an academic health center, though, is where you're going to train people. And so throughout the pandemic, people became more conscious of the need for Black physicians, and we started a conversation with Common Spirit Health. CEO is Lloyd Dean. And we announced last November that we would have a $100 million partnership where we will open up 5 regional medical campuses and 10 graduate medical education programs. So Morehouse School of Medicine class size will double to 225 students. Our PA program will reach 9 students. We will start 10 new GME programs around the country at their sites. And we will then be graduating 300 more Black physicians from residency training programs. Starting at about 5 years, you'll see the trajectory of that. But the most heartening, I think, and important thing that happened was when Lloyd Dean brought his leadership team down here in June, we were the first place that they had traveled to in a year. And he came down and he experienced our students and experienced our faculty. And originally, Lord and I were talking about raising the 100 million. They had already given us 15 million. And now they are going to give us the 100 million. And so we are, so that we can jumpstart this initiative.
Thank you very much, President Rice. Now, President James, Vice President.
Yes, well, the most rewarding for me and my team, of course, is restoring Morris Brown College during a global pandemic. History will say that we saved this institution during a pandemic at a time in which we probably should have seen a double death sentence. You know, in the saving of Morris Brown with the accreditation candidacy, with us stabilizing our finances, our governance structure, starting endowment. You know, I mentioned to you that my first day on the job, my employees were 6 paychecks behind. And we've been paying our employees on time for the last 2 years. How do you do that during a global pandemic with $0? It started with how we started this institution. For us, by us. We started a campaign, a grassroots campaign. And again, history will say that we didn't receive any COVID dollars. We haven't received any of these funds from the McKinsey Scotts of the world and the lights. It was a grassroots movement of saving this institution, stabilizing our finances, stabilizing our academic structures, starting new academic programs, getting the candidacy. Hopefully very soon we'll announce that we will get our financial aid back. You know, quadrupling our enrollment during a global pandemic. I mean, it's insane. You know, what the pandemic did for us, it pushed us in the deep end of the pool with online programs. We hired an executive director for online learning. We just hired a new provost. We're in the process now hiring a vice president for enrollment. Oh, by the way, everybody, I'm hiring in 2022. Please add, I am hiring in 2022. Please add me as a friend on LinkedIn. But restoring Morris Brown College during this global pandemic, of course, is the most rewarding. And, you know, what we're going to be for students who need that opportunity to be able to earn a college degree. You know, we're in the process right now of adding new faculty, of making sure that our academic profile is high. You know, we did all of this during the global pandemic, and I'm just very, very excited to be at Morris Brown. And I want to say this in closing, the best is absolutely yet to come for our institution. We are back.
Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Smith-Campbell.
Thank you. My colleagues have heard me tell this story many times, but I'm going to tell it again anyway. And that is that when I first came to Spelman, I met with the local principals of the schools in the Washington cluster, the elementary, middle school, and high school principals. And I asked those principals, how can Spelman be helpful to you? And what shocked me at that gathering is every single one of those principals said, teach our students to read. And when the pandemic came and the public school students had to revert to remote learning, and our own students had to pivot to remote learning, it only increased the difficulty that our public schools had in making sure that our students just got the very basic education. And out of that dinner that I had with those principals, Spelman worked with our Department of Education, and the former chair of our education department, Dr. Lewis, is part of this group of Institute scholars. We worked with them and they helped us put together a literacy program for the Atlanta public schools that engaged our own students. And we had over 125 students who would go out into 5th, 6th, and 7th grades and teach literacy tutorials one-on-one after school. And over 2 or 3 years, the reading assessments rose dramatically. And what was most striking to me during this pandemic is when our students came back to campus was how eager our students were to get back into those schools and get back into the work of lending a hand and pulling these young people forward. And what it said to me is that we have an extraordinary amount of agency ourselves. There's so much that capital, intellectual capital, educational capital, emotional capital that we have to invest and contribute in our neighborhoods. And I saw that come out in my students. That was just one example. Our students who participated in the literacy program, it's called Spell Reads. I saw it on campus with students organizing these massive events safely for not only Spelman, but for all of the campus so that our students had an opportunity to socialize. And I sat in with them for a few sessions as they planned them. And it was just extraordinary to see them taking charge, taking matters into their own hands. And finally, I have this small group that I've had ever since I have come to Spelman. It's a different group of students every year. It's called the President's Reading Circle. And together we have a book that we all read, and we spend, 4 or 5 sessions reading the book. We have dinner together, reading the book, discussing it. And it gives me a chance to listen to them and to hear them and to understand exactly what our students need for them to take the reins from us, because that's, after all, that's what we're doing on undergraduate campuses. And I think in a strange way, the pandemic gave us those opportunities for our students to take the reins, to step up to leadership, to exert agency, and to really understand that even in the worst of times, that they could make a profound difference. And that was enormously gratifying.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smith-Cameron. Let me close with a couple of remarks. You heard from the leaders of the institutions here in the Atlanta University Center, the most diverse and the largest collection of higher educational institutions for African Americans in the country. These institutions are very important for obvious reasons. First, the young people whose training and personal development is affected by these institutions. The business leaders, the scientists, the physicians, the politicians, the artists, and others who come from our institutions. Our institutions are secondly important for our country. We must have within the constellation of institutions in American society, those institutions who represent us. It is important not only to have institutions such as the Black Church, but educational institutions that know our history, our culture, our value system, and that promote it. And you, as the potential leaders of such institutions in the future, will have that as your charge and your responsibility to see that these institutions thrive and that the current culture that we are seeing develop over the past 2 years continues. Because these institutions, as all of you know, from the beginning, have never been adequately funded, but they have had the expectations put upon them to be equally productive as our better funded, predominantly white institutions. Hopefully, the changes that we've seen in the past 2 years will continue and will expand so that the productivity of these institutions and their contributions, not only to America, but to the world, will continue and will enlarge. So you, as future leaders of these institutions, will have a heavy responsibility and a major challenge and a major opportunity to affect them. So we thank our presidents for sharing their experiences with us, their perspectives. You'll have a network of people as you do become presidents and chancellors. We hope that you will call upon these presidents for their perspective. Certainly during my days as president, I had the pleasure and opportunity of being able to call Sherm Melancon, who was dean at UCLA, who was part of a program that I participated in in the fall of 1975 as a new dean for Morehouse School of Medicine. I learned a lot during a session such as what you've had, but not everything. So during the following years, I would have the ability to call Sherm or Pierre Galletti or other people, Marion Mack, and you will remember you are a coach, you are a leader, but you are not the institution by itself. You depend upon your faculty, your students, your administrators, your alumni in your broader community. Your success as a leader will depend upon how you marshal these resources to get the mission accomplished that you have as leader of your institution. So with that, I'll let Dr. Dozier close us out with her remarks.
What a renowned session with these historic. Yesterday, Dr. Jada BT, I am because you are, and because each of you are, therefore they will be. So you are sitting in front of our current, and to have all 6 AU Center colleges and universities present is historical. We have time for possibly one. They would be traveling. We would never have gotten the ball in the same space. And Dr. Schmidt Campbell is traveling. So if you are, who has a question, a comment? Okay, 2 of you, go to the owl. Go stand near this table. It will be your mic. While they are doing that, I just need the presidents to do a shout out. Historical, first institution. What year was it founded? Who's the first at the table?
1881.
Morehouse, what year?
1867.
All right, Morris Brown, what year?
1881.
Spelman, what year?
1881.
What am I up to? ITC,
1958.
Morehouse School of Medicine. Do you see the history? From 1867. When they say, why can't Black folks do something and sustain it, remind them that we have, we do, and we will. And make it a 30-second question, and we have room for a 1-minute answer.
Very quick. Andrea Lewis, Director of Student Success at Spelman, and also a student at the
Walk closer
ITC.
to the owl. There you go.
Okay. My question is, I know that leading in HBCU is difficult, but leading during the COVID-19 pandemic is exceptionally challenging and stressful. What did you all do or are still doing during the pandemic to keep yourself centered, grounded, for self-care, just to give yourself some rest to be able to keep going to serve your students and campus?
Great question. A couple of you can answer.
Well,
Dr. Campbell can answer.
I like to work out and ride my Harley Davidson. And I do a lot of weird stuff. I like to go fishing. I take care of myself. But you all hear it all the time, working out and really just making it be very intentional of taking some self-time. I haven't been able to take one of those 2-week vacations that I have, but I have still been able to. Yeah, I can't leave that long. But self-care, just doing what you need.
I'm sorry, I have to leave in like
Go
2
right ahead,
minutes.
Dr.
And I would love to answer Dr. Lewis, and she's a faculty member and director of our student success at Spelman. But I echo Dr. James. Self-care is absolutely number one. I swim. We have a great pool at the Wellness Center. Wherever, if I'm traveling, I find a hotel that has a pool. I walk. But I also have very strict rules about eating breakfast with my husband, being with my family, finding time for my friends when I do go, when I travel. I love the theater. I love museums. I find time for that. I read. You have to spend the time, take the time to cultivate and nourish yourself, and take the time to just unplug and be with yourself in silence from time to time. It's critical.
May I add quickly?
Awesome, powerful. Thank you, Dr. Cameron. Thank you for coming on virtually. We know you have other commitments. Thank you.
May I add
Yes,
quickly?
thank you.
I'll just say two quick things. First, thank you for that question. That, you know, within this leadership formation, we cannot forget the affective dimension of leadership and how our nervous systems, our psychological and spiritual health are related to the quality of the work that we do. I have a therapist that I see on a consistent basis. I've been with this therapist for 20 years. And for me, it's a practice of psychological and spiritual hygiene, right? And so I would recommend that because it helps you keep track of yourself in the midst of all of the tumult and turmoil of being an executive leader. You need some tools and companions who help you keep track of yourself. So I would highly recommend that, as well as finding friend groups with whom you can let your hair down.
All right, because we're gonna only be able to take that question, we have our panel, but let me just ask, did anybody else want to add to that question? 30 seconds.
I would just say the health and wellness is a must, and so you have to put it on the schedule and have no shame about it. So I put on the schedule, all of my staff know when I am doing things that are focused on me, and I have no shame about that. The second thing is an executive coach, for sure. Some people use as be a therapist, but all of you should build it into your contract. And it is something that is ongoing, always someone that you're talking to every week outside of your institution, who you can definitely have an opportunity to share things, because sometimes these positions do get lonely, right? And so you really do need another voice to help create the reality of how you manage these situations.
Thank you so much. Dr. Thomas, thank you.
I would just be repeating what my colleagues have said.
Thank you.
I agree with everything here.
We have another phenomenal session coming up, our luncheon and our award ceremony. We hope that you can stay. If you can't, we understand, but we do have our mayor will be out here. A number of persons will be receiving awards. Let me just take a moment to thank the renowned Honorable Louis Sullivan. We had to abbreviate it, not do his whole bio, but please spend time and look up and study this great man and great leader. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for all that you have done for all of us. At this time, fellows, you have less than 5 minutes to just kind of take a break.